Today we're having another supergroup session with a very special guest. It's one that I've really been looking forward to, especially the last couple of weeks. And we're just talking just before we sort of started recording, and Kay was saying how close the parallels are, and I totally agree. So, and what people are learning at Mind Focused Running, and the what he outlines in his book is very, very close in terms of when I was reading it, I was almost blown away by how close things were, and I thought, if I was to write a textbook for Mind Focused Running, this would be pretty damn close. So, and I think that's terrific. So Kay Bretz is a top performing ultra runner. In 2019, he ran 259.6 kilometers and finished 11th in the world at the World 24-Hour Championships in France. He finished third at Coast to Cozy this last December, and as well as the road and track, he's finished first at Big Red Run, multi-day in the desert, and second at the very first Delirious 200 miler. Last year, Kay released his book, Turning Right, which charts his journey and unique approach to running, the corporate and life. For his day job, he consults in business and leadership transformation. So with Mind Focused Running, when people join up, we have a sort of a 13-week program of core sessions that people go through, and it's an hour a week. And it was one of the earliest sessions that I was running through. And I was talking about letting go of your ego, and mentioned Kay's book during that session. And Shireen, who's here today, reached out, and it was only like 2 or 3 days later, and said that I'd inspired her to start listening to the audiobook version, and she just said how much she was enjoying it, and she was sort of halfway through it in 2 or 3 days, which I thought was an enormous effort. Kay has been someone I've been wanting to get along for one of our supergroup sessions for a long time, but I knew last year he was busy doing interviews and podcasts for the book's release. And Shireen's comment was what I finally needed to make this happen. So thank you, Shireen, and thank you, Kay. I've known Kay for some time, probably firstly through Aura, but then caught up with him very briefly when he came through Monkey Rock Aid Station at Delirious in 2019. It was very early in the morning. There'd been a long time between runners, and he was in and out of that aid station like a flash. Later that year, and some of you will know, I did my run across Sumbawa and was supposed to continue and go across Lombok, and I did that I started a couple of days before Christmas. And after about 4 or 5 days, I ended up with food poisoning. I'd had all of this very traditional Indonesian food, which had worried me as one of the big risks of doing that run. But the first Western meal I had was the one that gave me food poisoning, and that's pretty well par for the course, I think, when you're doing those sorts of things. But Sumbawa's, it's not like Bali or Lombok. My time in Sumbawa, I didn't see one other Western person. But I was lucky I was being helped by a local from Sumbawa who had who was working with the charity that I'd raised some funds for, and he was following me on his motorbike, when I came down with this food poisoning, it wasn't very pleasant, and as luck would have it, the next town was the town where he came from. So I got into his side cart, and he took me to his home, and I wasn't quite ready for I guess you could say it was poverty, and like the house just had a very bare concrete floor, and he invited me to sleep there, and we got there about 1 a.m. in the morning, but there weren't beds, right? So basically it was a mat on the concrete floor, and after 4 or 5 days of running plus terrible food poisoning, it wasn't a good place to be. But so I couldn't sleep, and I decided that I'd just update my Facebook with news to people who'd supported me in terms of the money raising, just to say that unfortunately this food poisoning meant the end of the run, and put the phone down. And I think I managed to drift off for a little while, and I came back to my phone, and there was a message, and it was a message from Kay, which I wasn't expecting at all. And like, you know, I didn't know Kay that well, but I'll just read you his message. And he said, "I'm so sorry to read your update. Can't you just wait for 24 hours and see how you go then? Even if you cut it short at the end, just trying to be inventive as it's so devastating. In any case, heads up, you're a true champion putting yourself out there. Big hugs and Merry Christmas." Yeah. And that was such an absolute pickup at probably, one of the real lows of my running life. Like there was this thing which I hadn't achieved, and dealing with the food poisoning and the uncomfortable positions. But I think that really sums up Kay. That's the guy he is. He's so supportive of everybody. And so thank you again, Kay, for that. It was really important at the time.
Just comes back. Yeah, I've forgotten that, but I do remember, yeah.
So Kay was coached to his World 24-hour performance by ultra legend Martin Fryer, and a few years ago I was being coached by Martin as well, and it was Martin who very softly introduced me to mindfulness and meditation. And when I started mind-focused running, Martin said we had a mission to make people aware of this mindful approach to ultra running. And Turning Right, the book, does that exceptionally. As I said, I think it's pretty well the textbook on mindful running. And as I read it, the parallels with the concepts that we teach at Mind-Focused Running were just remarkable. So because there are so many parallels, like typically when I do one of these interviews, I have a number of questions of people, and I'm hoping that everybody else has got questions because I'm going to run out at some time. But that's not going to happen tonight, right? So if you guys haven't got any questions, that's okay. We can go for hours with the questions I've got. So my first question, Kay, you cover meditation obviously in the book, but I can't remember you sort of explaining exactly how you started with meditation and what techniques you use. Like I know you say you do mention that you're using very much a focus approach, and sort of what does your meditation practice look like today?
So the hard one to answer is how I really stumbled across it. I remember it was at a similar time when this Turning Right happened, which was round about 2014, but it was unrelated. I was somewhat looking for things of how to. I don't even know. It didn't have an objective, so I can't really answer when I started. I just know how I started, and it probably had nothing to do with real meditation. So I was lying on the kitchen floor, putting some kind of easy music on, and just closed my eyes. That was the beginning, and I just, in a way, I just focused for half an hour, and then my Cairo, he somehow introduced me to a meditation course where they were actually over 6-7 weeks, once a week in the evening, were just showing different techniques and just introducing the just some basics. And so I wasn't too hung up on technique, and that's some of my view on anybody who starts it. You know, as I understand here, we're beyond the starting level probably for most, but I don't want to tread on anybody's feet. It doesn't really matter. My personal view is the technique actually don't waste your time on is it this technique or that technique. It's just see what resonates, and if you swap, you swap, but don't search too much. Just it's about doing it. It's about experiencing it. I personally landed with Vipassana meditation. So I've done 2 of their retreats. Those are for the ones who don't know. Sorry, for the ones who don't know, it's a 10-day very monastic retreat where you wake up 4:30 or 4 o'clock in the morning, and then it's pretty much it's silent. It's very regimented. It's 10 hours of meditation a day, plus a discourse in the evening, and then you keep going for 10 days. So it's for the untrained mind like mine. When I went into the first one of them, it is a shock to the system. It's like starting with an ultra run. But I really have benefited from that, and I went back for the second one just when we could here in Melbourne, because things were opening up again. So in a way, in simple terms, what I do is I tend to start with just focus on the breath, and then in layman's term, I would call it it's a body scan. That's basically what it is. Yep. Which helps me personally because I tend to be very disconnected from my body, and I'm somewhat reclaiming that. And then it ends with some loving kindness meditation. So it's my 3-in-1, but the main chunk tends to be just the body scan. That's what I do. I'm not too hung up on it. If I join anybody else on any other meditation, more than happy to. Yeah.
So how long would you be doing on average a day?
At least an hour. So that's the aspiration is 2 hours, and I typically fall short, and I'm not going to judge myself on that. 2 hours it's I have all the excuses in the world why 2 hours is too much. 1 hour it's somehow has to fit in, and it does typically.
Yeah. So ultra runner, ultra meditator.
Yeah. I mean, and that the hard part is it is on top of quite a lot of running. So as I was saying beforehand, at the moment it is 200 kilometers a week, which adds up to quite some hours of running. And then there is the 1 hour of meditation, at least, if not more. And then obviously there's still some work to pay for bread and milk, which needs to be done as well.
Sure. In the book, you mention a number of concepts that align closely with Buddhist teachings, like equanimity, compassion, letting go of the ego, and you've mentioned your Vipassana retreats. So have you been attracted or studied Buddhist teachings at all?
Somewhat, yes. So I'm attracted to exploring what's there, and I'm very happy not putting it into any boxes. So probably early on, I was a bit deterred by anything which sounded religious, and I probably still am. So it's my approach is being open to the kind of teachings and seeing what resonates at this time, take what resonates and just leave the rest aside, and say maybe for another day. So that's my approach, and the kind of how I take it in is a lot through just Dharma talks on podcasts, where pretty much any time I'm in the car on my own, which recently had been very little, but previously commuting to work quite a lot. I would just put that on and say, got half an hour in the morning, half an hour in the evening in the car. So I get through an hour of Dharma talks and it just, yeah, I just see what resonates with me. And it's interesting how typically the right talk comes at the right time, and I just leave out what doesn't resonate with me. So that's probably the answer.
Yeah. And look, I think that's the absolute perfect way of looking at things. You know, as these guys know, I have been really reticent to sort of tread down the spiritual path because, you know, people do. Well, they get a little bit concerned by that sort of thing, and sometimes there's a bit of pushback potentially. That given we actually had a big chat about it, and everybody just said, look, Rob, just talk about what you want to talk about, and we'll figure out whether we want to listen to it or not. So that's the way things happen now, which has been great.
But maybe just as an add-on to your question about the Buddha's teaching, what does resonate with me is the concept that essentially it's an identity journey. That really resonates with me. That I mean, our upbringing, our education, and probably also work is very much about skills and achievements. And I could tell a lot about that. But essentially behind it is really the question of who are we? Now, that might go a little bit too far in the spiritual word, but it is, in simple terms, just an identity question. And that's, I mean, you mentioned the ego beforehand. It's really what do we carry around with us of who we think we are, and the lighter we can hold that, the easier it becomes. And that really resonates with me out of the Buddhist teachings. Yeah,
actually, like you discuss ego numerous times in the book, and the book is so honest in terms of your description of your life as a child, your difficult relationship with your father and mother, experiences at boarding school, etc. And as I was reading it, I was thinking to myself, could I be that honest? Your ability to go down that track and to share that, do you think that comes a little bit from actually being able to let go of the ego?
Probably. It didn't come natural to me. So there was the day when I decided writing a book, and so I started writing a book, not knowing how you write a book, and for 1.5 years it didn't really make any progress. I've written pages, but it didn't make progress in terms of resonating. Until I noticed that it was a complete hero story. It was all the kind of stuff which I was proud of and which I wanted to share with the world, and it was about me and the me and me. So it was really that ego story. And I'm sure had I somehow tried to publish it, first of all, nobody would have published it for me, but you certainly wouldn't be sitting here saying you would have enjoyed the book. So those kind of going into vulnerability certainly doesn't come natural to me, but it's the journey which I have noticed how much potential it actually it opens up. So the more I'm making myself vulnerable, the easier things become. And that's just, it's so counterintuitive to everything, every bone in my body saying, no, just be strong. Because I mean, think of ultra marathons, just be strong. And is actually the opposite, which leads to the amazing results.
Yeah. So just on that, and I took this quote from the book, and you say, and this was after Big Red Run and Christchurch, and you said, in the desert I did my best. In Christchurch I wanted to be perfect. The paradox in the desert was that incredible achievements occurred once I dropped the need to be successful. This dropping the need to be successful, letting go of ego-driven outcomes, is core to mind-focused running. but it's one of the most difficult strategies to apply. Can you talk about that?
Yes. So so the desert was my first. It was, just to give a bit background. I was very much in the marathon world, and for I can't remember 14, 16 years, just running one marathon after the other, and it clearly became an ego game of, can I get another personal best? I mean, why else would I do it? That was my mindset. And then there was this big disruptor, which was turning right, which, let's not go down that path right now. But I signed up to big red runs of 250 kilometers in the desert, which was a completely different world to 42 kilometers on the road. So I didn't know how to do it. And I completely thrived because I just let go of control and I just ran. I was fully present, pretty much intuitively did all the things which then afterwards I had to learn over lots of years. So I just got there, had that experience of what is possible. And then the ego came back through the back door afterwards, where it said, okay, now I've got it. Now I understood what is possible. But I didn't have the foundation of what I actually did. So that kind of mind-based running, I did it, but I didn't know what the recipe was. And so instead, the ego just said, okay, now I can go back into my control and just force myself doing that. So you see the language, or you hear the language. It was, and I tried to make it into the 100K World Champs team, and I miserably failed. It was complete about, everything was about control, regimented, was all the things which I hadn't done before, and therefore didn't get to that kind of light running, and the results just showed it. So I was probably physically able to run a qualifier which was somewhere around that 7:20, 7:30 mark for 100K. That was, I'm sure I was at that level. And in the race, I just managed to get an 8:20. So probably an hour and maybe more than an hour slower than what I should have been capable of, just because the mindset wasn't there. And it was just the ego coming back through the back door saying, I'm taking control here and we're going to do this. And it was all about achievement. And that just did not work out for me. And then from there started the journey of, okay, how do I now, what are the elements? And I wish you guys had a handbook at that time, which I could just have read, saying this is what I need to do. Instead, I somehow had to figure it out. And that's the journey of my book, of just saying, I figure it out. If nobody can tell me how this is working, I will figure it out. And then I somehow felt like over the years, I did figure it out in a way, and tried to put it into a book so not everybody has to go through all those painful experiences.
Yeah. So fast forward to France World Championships. How do you bring that way of thinking into a major 24-hour race? So obviously you need some idea of pace plan going in, right? Like you need to know how fast you're going to run, what the run walk strategy is going to be, and through that process you would add up the pace, multiply it out, and end up with X number of Ks for 24 hours, right? So if that's what you do, then how do you let go of those success parameters during the actual event?
So the interesting thing is, it's just the comparison between the qualifier and the World Champs itself, because there were 3 months in between, which pretty much shows there was no real fitness game between them. So I was actually concerned, saying, how can I run the World Champs 3 months after the qualifier? Because obviously there's quite some recovery, and there's not a lot of time to actually do a lot in terms of fitness. And coming from the results, comparing the results, I ran almost 20 kilometers further in the World Champs than in the qualifier. So I really attribute all of that to mindset, pretty much, which I think is a fair thing. So, and the main difference was, so I had all those things in place for the qualifier in terms of what is my run walk strategy, what's my nutrition strategy, all of that I had. And I executed it somewhat. But what I didn't have, and that was the interesting thing in the qualifier, so Martin Fryer, he was in Adelaide where I qualified with multiple roads. So he was there as a selector, just looking at potential candidates. He was there as well as looking as my coach. He was there part of my support crew. So he was looking at me the entire race. And we celebrated that evening that I'd run 240 kilometers, which is in a qualifier, and 341 meters. So it was like, basically I got to the A qualifier, which he said that's what I needed to do, with 90 seconds to spare. So it was really touch and go, and it was touch and go for 12 hours, really. I somehow, probably the German within me just got it right. There was some sort of precision. But the real point was, and that made the change for the World Champs, we sat in the pub in the evening just having some pub food to celebrate and to recover. And he said, Kai, well, congratulations, obviously, well done, and welcome to the team. It wasn't official yet, but he knew that I would make it into the team. And he said, but now we need to have an honest conversation here. It's what I've seen from you mentally and how you treated your support crew was not World Champs worthy. Like, he didn't use those words, but pretty much he said, you were a real prick. That's what he said. And what he meant by it, and I was absolutely ashamed by it, just there was that reaction which I had to swallow of somehow explaining and saying, yeah, but it was pressure and we somehow made it, so can we somehow forget about it? But he pointed the finger, and rightly so, because what the pressure did to me in that race. So first of all, like, there was that pressure. I mean, I had Christchurch in the back of my mind, which was an attempt to get a World Champs qualifier, and like an hour slower than I could have done it. So there was that kind of failure story still in the back of my mind, which, fair enough. It's my personal best before, and had been 212 kilometers, and the bar was 240. So how do I jump from 212 to 240? It was like, I'm actually capable of that. And what he meant by treating my support crew the way I did was, I was just so focused on myself there, of just how can I make it through the race, that I knocked out the bottle out of Rebecca's hand, where I was just not fully present at feeding times in a way. I was more like commanding them around and not happy when something went wrong. I wasn't really a team player. And I'm so grateful that he pointed that out, as painful as it was, of saying, well, that's not World Champs worthy, because that moment I set the intention, okay, the World Champs will be different. So it's like, I hear you, I agree with you, I'm ashamed of this, but I will rock up as a different person. And that's the key thing, is I've made it to the World Champs, but I will prove you wrong in a way that I'm not the World Champs worthy. I will rock up, and the one thing I will do in the World Champs is I will rock up as a complete team player, and whatever the outcome is. So that was some of the success measure for me, of just rock up and be the person who I'm proud to be, whatever then the outcome is. And then everything else just fell into place. So it was a 1.5 kilometer loop at the World Champs, and I was cheering, smiling, encouraging every single lap, the support team, every other runner with Australian outfit, New Zealand outfit, or German outfit on the course. So constantly, in a way, generously giving my energy to other people. And what happened as a result was, I was energized myself, and the pacing was, I didn't pace with a watch because my watch didn't work. So at the start line, my watch failed on me. So I had the watch in the stadium there. I could watch it, but I didn't have a GPS or so. So I was running without a GPS watch the entire race. And I ran 130 kilometers in the first half, and 300 meters less in the second half. So without a watch, just through that kind of sharing energy and having fun and being the person I wanted to be, trusting myself, it all fell into place. So I've no clue how I did it. Right now, when I'm training for my next 24 hours, just it feels like, oh, I have such a mountain to climb to get to where I was. I know that that's not the bar, but that's what it feels like. Like how did I ever do that? But yes, that's when we're in the zone and completely relaxed. That's what happens.
Yeah. Look at, I've looked at your pace per kilometer or every lap in that race, and it's remarkable. Like it is so consistent. And I always thought that it was just masterful pacing that achieved that. But it was, when I read the book and you say that you were planning a fade, and that, but the fade never came. You were just able to keep going. Is that the sort of tactic that you'll plan from now on? So at a 24, will you be allowing for a fade?
Well, allowing is only if there's a real goal. So what I've noticed when I'm at my best, when I'm taking away the pressure of a goal, and I have to qualify that. Obviously, there's always some sort of an indication of what am I pitching at. Can't just go out and say, let's see whether it's 200 kilometers or 300 kilometers, obviously. But it's not being too prescriptive, because I would never have run 259 kilometers planning for it. It happened. So how I went into the World Champs was ideally let's get 240 again. How nice would it be getting another 8 qualifier at the World Champs? And as Summer set out at that 130 for the first half, lots of space to fade again and get 240. Ideally get 250, and then there's still some space to fade. But the real point is the limiting belief, of which the stories we tell ourselves are constantly full of just beliefs which are actually not right. And we can say, yes, but it's the truth that everybody fades. And there is a truth in it, and there is a logic in it. But why do we have to believe it? That's my experience from the World Champs. And very likely it will happen next time round as well, that I will fade something. So what? Do I have to believe it, that's what's bound to happen? No, it's not. And the same happened in Delirious, my best, the 350K race. My best 3 hours were the last 3 hours, and probably in general the last 24 hours were 28 hours were significantly better mindset wise than the first 40 hours. So that logic of we are degrading over time, I don't believe that logic anymore. It's a good excuse in a way, and I'm now deliberately provoking here a little bit. But if we believe it, it's true. But what happens if we don't believe?
Yeah. No. I totally get that. Thank you. You mentioned Delirious, and in the book you talk about reaching Parry Beach in a really significant low, and there's delirious runners here on this session, and I'm sure they can all sympathize with you. And we talked about this a few days ago, so would you mind reading a few paragraphs from that section, from Turning Right?
Absolutely. So it was the big low. So we're talking now 40 hours into the race, and I was aware of it, but I was just carrying this big ego with me. So, and it was just tearing me down, and there was nothing I could do. So, yeah, let's see. So this reminds me of reading the audiobook. So welcome to the experience of reading a book. two pieces of advice I have for everybody on the board. First of all, if you don't want to waste too much time, never write a book. It's draining a lot of time. The second one, should you still do it, don't read your own audiobook. It's a very painful experience. So so let's see how this goes. It felt miraculous, and I saw clearly what had happened. I had let go of my ego. The bureaucrat had gone to sleep in the car, and the explorer had woken up. The fear of failure was replaced by the excitement to extend my limits. I no longer identified with success. Richard Barrett couldn't have outlined the journey any better with his 7 levels of consciousness. This is a side note. That's one of the very, very few concepts I mention, and I can highly recommend. Just there is an article, Rob, I might share that with you, which you might want to share. It's
Sure.
it's about 7 levels of consciousness. Richard Barrett. So my ego had been in charge for 2 days, making the whole race one almighty battle. Consequently, I was utterly exhausted and felt defeated. Instead of dealing with the circumstances as they were, I'd created a disconnect between my expectations and reality, the perfect recipe for trouble. The path out of my misery was to become aware of the choice I had all along. That choice was to widen my consciousness and let go of the urge to stay in control. I could now have knowing without any thinking involved. I had surrendered. Surrendered any need to control, and surrendered to circumstances as they played out. I'd conquered my mind by letting go. I was relying not on a future promise, but on an instantly available reality. I felt in harmony with the world and myself, tranquil. I had no more battles to fight. I hadn't surrendered because of the sleep. I had slept because of the surrender. I'd been convinced that my circumstances were the issue. That had kept me stuck, until I realized that it was my perspective that trapped me. Everything needed to be stripped away from me to discover the resources I had within. The inner magic emerged again because I was playful and connected. The difference was that I allowed everything to arise as it did. For the first time in this race, I fully embraced uncertainty. I was going to deal with whatever would come. The saving ground was within me, not somewhere external, where I had been searching. How much energy had I wasted by not letting go of control from the beginning? And if that was the perfect way to run an ultramarathon, what would happen if I led my life with that attitude? What if I brought this mindset to everyday life? It would be even more powerful if I could help others access this state.
Yeah, I think that describes it really well, Kai. And I have to go to people for questions, and I've got a heap more, but I just want to finish on this one because I think it's probably the most important one of all. And again, from the book, you say there are worlds between knowing something and being capable of applying that wisdom. In other words, it's easy to say and it's a lot harder to do. And this is what we see so often, like people know, they've been through the sessions, they understand, but they get to the start race and a start line, and all of a sudden, all of that wisdom goes out the door, and they're back in success mode. How do you overcome that gap?
You tell me, and I will be way better runner. Oh, I have to admit, and that's a really sad truth. I know this, I've experienced it, I've put it into practice, and I regularly forget. That's my reality. So I know exactly. Take the World Championships. I know exactly that it takes everything I did right there and I know how hard it is, because I can't force myself into that state either, because that again is the clinging to knowing that that's what it is and trying to get there doesn't get me there. It's the opposite again. So that's some other paradox in this, that knowing more doesn't make it any better either. And the proof is in the pudding of just I'm delirious. I was battling for 40 hours, and I had learned that lesson before. It took me 40 hours to just let go. And yeah, so asking me, I'm probably the wrong person to say how do you get there from minute one, because probably the real answer is saying, don't worry if it takes 40 hours. I mean, that's what it is, and if that's the journey you have to go through, it's your choice. Is it 40 hours, or does it take you 80 hours to get there? And maybe it's not in this race, maybe it's in the next race, but be patient, and you will notice yourself what it takes to surrender, because you can't force yourself into it. You actually, the more you force, the more you're going away from where you want to go. It's not a satisfactory answer.
Oh
but
no, look, I so totally get it.
Yeah.
And I wish you had the answer to that question, but it's impossible.
It's really, I think the real answer to this is, I feel the journey is, there are skills involved, and skills is the easy part, where you can apply the skills or not apply the skills. But then there is what I would call the operating system. So it's one as well, we can download new apps, or we can somehow try to get a new program working, and that's okay. But over time, the real journey is upgrading the operating system underneath. That takes time, and when that upgrade happens, it's more likely that some more stable programs run on top of it. So that's my philosophy in a way, and that's where I say my at least 1 hour of meditation is non-negotiable, because I can't tell you what this 1 hour I did today, what difference it made, but I can tell you in accumulation it will do something.
Yeah, I was going to say, so is the meditation part of that operating system upgrade? So
absolutely.
No, that's right.
Yeah.
And the more, the bigger the impact, right?
Yeah. But the nice thing is, when things don't go right, and Christchurch, you've mentioned it before, and then there are lots of other examples. I think everybody on this call will have the example of horrible races. I have to admit, as painful as they are, but horrible races are still my best teacher. So in the end, I can say I didn't want this experience, but probably I just needed it. And then the question is, what is there to learn? So already having gone through a horrible experience is one thing, but then at least make it work for you and say, it's not what I wanted, but what's the teaching in here?
Yeah. No. Thank you, Kai. All right, I'm going to open it up to the floor now. Who's got a question? Greg's moving towards his unmute button.
It's great hearing what you've got to say tonight, Kai. I really appreciate it. I loved your book, and I loved the fact that you narrated it. I think books like that narrated by the author make it really special. And I loved the self-check-ins at the end of each chapter, some really confronting questions. And I think if you make an effort to work through those questions, then you can learn a lot about yourself.
I'll take you along to any advertising, and I'll take you as a wingman.
But my question follows on a little bit from what you were just saying, what Rob was asking. I mean, through the book, you go through a lot of breakthroughs and realizations in sort of understanding what's needed to get to where you'd like to go, whether it's business or racing. Is it the case that you still that you still find it's easy to slip into complacency about those realizations? Do you have to learn those realizations over again, or once you've got it, you've kind of got it, and you can keep building on that? Does that make sense?
So it is. I mean, I unfortunately, it's probably the kind of learner I am. Is I can make the same kind of learning. I have to make it several times. So it's I might be a slow learner, but then at least I'm a dedicated learner. So I'm not saying that everybody has to go through that, but they're probably, I would suspect that there are nuances in anything to do with the ego. The ego is very sneaky, and I'm sure that's not only my ego. But it says, yeah, I get the learning in this kind of, with these parameters, and then they're slightly different, and you make the same mistake, and then from a bit of a distance you say, yeah, well, I could have prevented it, but I just needed to go through it. So I don't know why. I mean, I had a run-in with my sport crew in Christchurch, which was a horrible race. And then you ask, well, why like under the same kind of pressure, a few years later, did I have to make the same kind of mistake again of saying I'm somehow not treating everybody as a team? I knew it wasn't okay, and I did it again. So you might rightly say I'm just a slow learner, but it was somehow, for me, it was not the same thing. It was like, yeah, but that was different. It's a bit sad. I'm not sure whether I'm answering your question, but if that's the case, I would say that the best one can do is just, I think the worst one can do is being judgmental about the kind of, how slow of a learner I am. And I'm not going down that path of beating myself up, saying I should do that better. Yeah, maybe I should, but that's not who I am. And it just takes me a little bit longer.
Yeah, I think that's one of the key things too. Is yes, you will probably make the same mistake again, but as you said, the earlier you can recognize that mistake, the better. And I don't know if Alexis is on the session, but when he was running the 100-miler a few weeks ago at Delirious, I think he would agree that he went out way too fast, but he recognized it and then sat down and meditated for 10 minutes. Yeah. So, and that was a conscious thing, like, don't, let that snowball keep rolling down the hill, getting bigger and bigger and bigger, just sort of put the brakes on and recognize it and change. Yeah.
To sum up and build on Rob, what you just said, it's the formula, this very simple formula I use and introduce in the book is upset awareness choice. And it is as simple as that. We all have enough upsets, and they just happen. The awareness, somehow we can grow it, and that's what we're working on. But it's only really useful if we get to the moment of choice. And the Alexis example is a perfect one. It's saying, yeah, something isn't going exactly as it should go. At some point, there's awareness. And then the question is, whenever that awareness comes, don't look back into the past, stay in the present and see what is the choice here. And there might not be a lot in line with what the original objective was, but that's probably where the wisdom comes in, of saying, yeah, it's just new circumstances, and what's the best I can do now.
So it's about trying to build that space, I guess, between stimulus and response.
Correct. It's all Viktor Frankl. That's all it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Who else has got a question?
John.
Hi. Besides the running, obviously improving with the meditation, What have you seen in the changes in you since you went down this journey in terms of your character?
Certainly. So it's actually the interesting thing is it is a discovery. It is really, I feel it's a discovery of finding out who I've always been. And to qualify that, it's when I was very little, I do remember how joyful and playful I was. And then when you look at how I approach things, it's very disciplined, it's very organized, it's very regimented. And there is there are lots of strength in there, but you can see how much, when you lose the joyfulness and the playfulness, of how much of your original strength and power you actually give up just for something else which feels like more control. And probably the journey is saying, I keep I keep the discipline, right? There's a lot of, and I know how many people are struggling with that. I don't have an issue with that. I actually have the other issue, which is where's the lightness? And that's coming somewhere back because I don't take myself as seriously anymore. Now, also qualifying that, I'm very aware that probably can be way, way lighter than I currently am, but that's just the journey. So I feel there's not a huge surprise other than finding who you always knew that you already were. If that makes sense to you.
Have people close to you noticed the change in terms of, other than running, the
Yeah,
day-to-day behavior or the way you see the world?
the key change is so yes and no. So the yes is they do notice that I'm just going for things which are completely uncertain, whereas the kind of, as I called it in the opening paragraph I was reading, the bureaucrat in me would never do that because it's dangerous. It's why would I do that? I want to see what the outcome is, and then I can just execute on that. So I am going way more into that kind of uncertainty space, and in all areas of life. And the no is then it's listening to my partner, who then in the perfect moment said, well, Kai, don't you pride yourself that you're a little bit lighter, and where's that right now? So those questions I also get of saying, yeah, just do what you preach, and please change right now, because that would really be nice.
Yeah, I'm sure we all get a bit of that. Very good. Who else has got a question?
I felt like, I'm just checking, I felt like there was a twitchy finger from Jackie, but I might have misread it.
I will jump in. I loved your comments about playfulness, and your comments around being disciplined. I'm incredibly disciplined. I have grown up in a Navy family. My whole life is discipline. And I think how do you, I'm trying to frame my question, but how do you bring playfulness to, so I have a big race in a couple of weeks, and this is one that I DNF'd last year, so there's a bit of anxiety around it. How do you bring playfulness to a big event?
Yeah. The simplest answer would be, what is your intention at the event? So, so really going into an event, if you don't set an intention. So to give you a sense, it's at the World Champs, I had the clear intention to be connected. And what I meant by that was connected to, I didn't really know what I meant by that, but somehow intuitively it was that being there with the crew, being there as one team. And I really took it to the nth degree eventually. Like with the New Zealand team, I felt like I was almost part of them, and the German team was almost part of them. And I was just absolutely connected, and that's how it played out. But it was also my intention. And it's very easy to have a goal and not have an intention for a race. But then implicitly your intention is to achieve. And then you're easily between that kind of, are you there to win or are you there to fail? And then it can go well, it can go wrong. And if it goes wrong, it can go wrong really badly, because there's nowhere, where else do you go? Because the intention doesn't give a lot of room of other stuff. It's winning or losing. And if you see, I'm just simplifying this. But if playfulness is something which helps you, you need to make it a bit more center stage, would be my view. And the question is, what is your intention? Like, especially if there is, I mean, it sounds very comparable to my qualifying race, where I didn't have a good history with qualifying races, and the pressure's on, yeah. And a failed race or a DNF, the pressure is somewhat on, and that's the reality. Obviously, you don't want to DNF again, but what is your intention beyond the pure result? Like, why are you doing that race? And how does playfulness play into that?
Do you think there's a place where you can almost switch the discipline to being just the run, to switching the discipline to being about playfulness and adventure instead?
Yes. And I think that switch, you have the choice of making that switch right now, because speaking to somebody like-minded about discipline, I can assure you, you can, let's talk about we're probably putting discipline on a pedestal. It's the thing we have learned, you know, and for everybody else, it might not be, discipline might not be your theme, but this is true for whatever your theme is, and it might be the opposite. It might, it's whatever you do too much of, and in our case, it might be discipline. It's, it's like brushing your teeth in the evening. There's an element of discipline in it, but do you see that as discipline, or is it just part of a routine and you can trust your discipline? So I've noticed I put way too much energy into discipline for something which I'm so good at that I can just do it like brushing my teeth. It just happens. Like, there doesn't need to be a mom or dad behind me saying you have to brush your teeth. It just happens. So why am I treating myself like a little child who needs discipline all the time? Whereas what I actually can use that energy for is, I need to trust that things go well. I need some playfulness. I can just be a bit more connected. And that's where our energy should go in. We're basically wasting our energy on something we have enough of. That's the story here. And each one of us on this call will have a theme like that, where you're wasting your energy because you're good at it, you're amazing at it already. Do something else with that energy and trust yourself that it won't go away. Because our fear very likely is that, oh, if I don't focus on discipline, I will be complete disaster. And that's not true. If we let go of even 5% of our discipline, it's still good enough.
I love that. I could apply that to a lot of things in my life. So thank you.
Yeah, but you will notice that there is a part within us, and that's where I think it's the ego, which then just says, yeah, but who are we if we are not disciplined to the nth degree? It's that fear of, who are we if we're not this? And that's where the adventurer comes out and says, let's find out. And you will be very pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you.
Thanks for the question.
Great. Okay, so we're going slightly over time. I hope that's okay. I've got one more question for you. And you said in the book, after France, you said, people kept asking about particular running sessions I'd done in my preparation. I didn't want to appear too esoteric or even crazy, yet many of those who were asking me how I did it seemed to miss the essence of what I tried to convey. And in terms of what we're talking about tonight, like if you look at the ultra running community, it's a small percentage of people who get this. And I know I've talked to Martin about it, and Martin sort of said, you know, some people are sick of me talking about this stuff. How accepting of people being within the ultra running community of what you've conveyed after reading your book? Do they get it?
It's a really difficult one to answer. I think the typical response I get is people enjoy the book, and I would almost say most people sense there's somehow a gem in this kind of mindset. I'm not saying the book, but there's some kind of gem, because even people who don't get it, we are all craving for something more, and that's somewhere true. But then there is another, it's another level which is a difficult one to really go beyond what are we doing and go towards that being state. And it sounds very esoteric very quickly, and that's where the intellect holds people back. And I would have been one of them if I had been confronted with this. Probably I was confronted with this a few years earlier, where it just didn't resonate with me, because it's all, yeah, I hear all of that, but what have you been doing? Like, what were the sessions you were doing? Like, how have you been training? And my answer was, yeah, you're missing the point. It's not the session I've been doing. I can tell you exactly what my training schedule is. You can replicate it, and you will fall completely short of what I've been doing, because it's not that. It just isn't. You need to do the right training, yes. And you can do probably way better training than what I'm doing, but that's not the point. And that's even hearing that, I think back to what you said before, and until you experience that there is a lot of power in our state rather than in our action, that action just flows out of state, and everybody focuses on action and doesn't take the upstream view of what's the state leading to the action. That's probably the easiest way I can say it. It's, yeah, treat the symptoms, but you will never treat the illness. It's go upstream, go one level higher, and see what you can do there. You have the bigger lever. And that's probably the journey I've been on, which then led to this book, because I'm still absolutely surprised, whether it's running or whether it's business, it's all out there. And it's not that I put it out there. I mean, you say there are heaps of people in the community. You notice how many people there are who contribute to this topic, this thing, from all different angles. And it's clearly, you get the edge with it. You just get the edge. And then it's, yeah, I see that, but that's not for me. Yeah, that's okay. I mean, that's everybody's choice what they do with it. But I still find it surprising, yeah, to then just default back to, yeah, but what's your training? Like, how are you training? I'm not keeping it secret, but I'm refusing to talk too much about my training, because it just does not matter. I can tell you what I've been doing this week. So what? It will not help anybody on this call.
Yeah. Look, I think that's so right, Kai. And what I've come to realize is that people can do the 13-week mind focused running core sessions, or they can read a book such as yours. But I think what it is the lived experience that you talk about. It's the time, it's the years of meditation, it's making the mistakes, it's the experience, it's that journey, right? It's not something you can sit through for 13 weeks or read in a book and know the answers.
So it does come back to, it is the hero's journey. So as a concept, and anybody who isn't familiar with it, just Google it. It is the hero's journey. We are on, it's just what it is. And what the hero's journey talks as crossing the threshold, where we go from the ordinary world into a special world. That's where it becomes esoteric very quickly, but that's where the entire game shifts into an inner game. And that's what I've called turning right, in a way. That's how I stumbled over it. I fell down the rabbit hole into Wonderland, and different rules apply there, and it doesn't all make sense, and I don't have language for it, and we need to explore what does that look like, and what is it, what's worth bringing back into our normal world and apply. And you will do that, and you find something which resonates with you, and just cling to what resonates with you. Forget all the rest. Say that's not for you in this loop, in this lap, and it will get you to another level. And then there will be some energy to say, okay, that wasn't that bad. Let's do it again, and do the next loop. And there might be some failure on that one. Fine, and it's failure. Maybe that's the learning the next time round. I mean, that's why I'm actually probably a bit less obsessed how the next race goes, because I just know it will be amazing anyway. If it's the worst race ever, well, there's something which I'm just clinging to, where I just have to learn something, and the accelerator to learn is a horrible race.
Look, thanks so much, Kai. This has been a fantastic session. It's been so great to hear your learnings. Thank you. Just for those, well, some of those who were with Mind Focused Running, or has been with Mind Focused Running for a few years now, you might remember that I was talking about doing a sort of a Mind Focused running camp on a weekend in Perth, and we pretty well had it lined up. You know, Kai was going to come across, and Martin was going to come, and we're going to have one or two others there, and it was going to be lots of meditation stuff, talking about the sort of stuff that we're talking about today, and throw in a bit of running, and it would have just been an amazing weekend. But COVID happened and it couldn't happen. But I think we're sort of getting towards the end of it now, and I'm really hoping that we can still make that happen, because that would be such a good weekend. So,
Rob, why don't you all come over to Melbourne instead?
Yeah, well,
and we'll go hit the Alpine region.
Yeah, yeah, that could definitely happen.
Now the borders are open, come here.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Okay. Thanks again, Kai. Fantastic session. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me, and yeah, all the best. And I'm curious where it all goes.
Fantastic. All right. Speak to you next time.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.